to me, I think it was employers NI was the lion's share, then capital gains tax, and then after that it's these sort of other little niche areas that pick up the rest of it. But really, employer NI is the biggie, and that's going to have an impact onto the workforce.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you've got anyone with more than sort of 6 or 7 employees are really going to start to feel that pinch. I mean, it's going to get to the point where the employers will start to think, well, okay, we've got to put people's wages up on minimum wage, but again, do we look at doing a pay rise for the guys that are above minimum wage this year, or do we look at delaying it another year? Because again, we've got to fund that NMW increase, but then also we've got to fund this employers NI cost as well, which is huge, really. No other way of looking at it. It's quite a large chunk, even though they increase the employment allowance, and also they remove the cap off that as well, because there was a cap where if you had over a certain level of employers NIC the previous year, you weren't allowed the employment allowance. They've removed that, but even then, you are still going to be paying a lot more employers' national insurance over the tax year. So yeah, and again, I know we sort of touched on asset relief and stuff like that. We've got it's good to see that they're keeping the sort of the business asset relief at £1 million. There were talks of them actually scrapping that or even halving that as well. But the slow increase from 10% to 14 to then 18 in sort of 2 years' time as well is another sort of worrying one to be aware of as well. We've got it with that sort of change ahead of us. We might start to see some more business owners bringing forwards their disposal of assets. Again, we've got sort of November, December, January, February, March, sort of 5 months. Possibly 6 months before the end of the tax year to try and get this through, sort of sale of assets and stuff like that. So I think where we've got clients who we're looking at disposing of their companies, I think they're going to probably start looking at bringing that forward to try and get that 10% cost through. Because a 4% change is quite a large jump.
I think the rumour or some of the finer detail, I think they're actually looking at anti-forestalling measures for agricultural property and business property. Yeah. So I think there might be some potential actually that because those CGT changes took effect. I mean, I think those things are in the future, but I think the ones that took effect overnight were CGT and stamp duty, because that's another one we've probably not touched on. And to be fair, stamp duty for me, I think it's probably relevant to my side of the table, in that when I look at, again, coming back to my prior comment about changes to pensions, because it's been very pension focused. It's a pensions focused budget for me. When you look at, I said to someone the other day, what's the alternative? Yeah. It's as simple as that. It's what's the alternative? If you're someone who's an employer who's been paying into a pension, if you look at all the other alternatives, everything else is already subject to inheritance tax. Yeah. You've also got the fact now that, to me, the biggest area we come up against as advisors is, I was going to say, the great British love affair with property. And don't get me wrong, property is a great diversifier. It's a good income yielding asset class. It's very location specific. I think it's specific to the individual. If you know your area, you know what to do with it, you know how to make money with property. If you run it like a business, I think it'd be great. Yeah. Is the days of the market for somebody buying 1 to 2 buy-to-lets as a strategy, sort of leaving behind? To me, if you're a high rate taxpayer, and say you're taking your average buy-to-let that may be 30% deposit, 70% borrowing, that borrowing's expensive because interest rates are still high. The fees seem to be more for buy-to-let mortgages. 5% additional stamp duty on top of your other stamp duty bands for a second property. Yeah. You start to add all of these things in, mortgage interest rate relief, which we lost a few years ago. If you're a high rate taxpayer and you're starting with a yield of 6% on your buy-to-let property, and you're losing 40% of that in tax with no real abilities to offset the costs of it, the net returns are getting squeezed more and more and more. And actually, when you look at it and when you speak to some clients who are investing quite heavily into property, a lot of the return long term really is going to be hinged around capital growth and not necessarily and to me, I just think this increase in stamp duty again, it's another sort of punch, another jab at second property ownership. And I just think if I was in the shoes now, where I'm building my plan for the future and how I want to fund my retirement, and property it's a big question mark for me. I can't see it getting more tax efficient, and that's without considering rule changes which give tenants a lot more control and protection. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but as a landlord, I think it is a bad thing because it
does sort of start to scare you away from it. We've noticed
there's not enough benefits.
No, there's not. The benefits certainly start to seem more outweighed by the issues, by the problems that you can have with the tenants. Again, quite a few of our sort of landlord clients are personal private landlords, so they're certainly feeling the squeeze with what we nickname the Osborne tax, because it was George Osborne that brought it in, where the cap of sort of 20% on your interest relief or finance costs for the property. And when that came in, we saw quite a large shift from...
that was the biggie, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a very big one.
I think a lot of people started to exit portfolios from the... If you were a portfolio landlord, and obviously my view, and so I'm not the accountant at the table, but I often say when I sit down with new clients that if property is your route forward, you need a good accountant, you need to take advice, you need to consider, it's predominantly going to probably be in a limited company now as opposed to personally owned, and that means corporation tax and it means cost. It's a business. To me now, being a landlord is not a hobby thing to do. It's a business. You've got to be all in if you're going to do it. It's not something to tinker with, because there's too many rules, there's too many tax changes.
And again, there's too much legislation coming now through for tenants, and again, yes, there are
a few bad landlords have ruined it for other people, and it's the same with a lot of stuff, is that everyone gets tarred with the same brush, and people need protection, and people need a roof over their heads, and people need to know that they're safe. But equally, if you're on the other side of that and you're a landlord with a problem tenant and you're not getting paid or something, and both parties need to be mature and responsible. Unfortunately, people who've abused, turfing tenants out, which is morally totally wrong, have now meant that for people who are good landlords and who do things properly, they might end up being adversely affected by a bad tenant. So I think it's a very hands-on investment. It's something you've got to roll your sleeves up and get stuck in with. So
it's certainly not like a hobby investment. If you've got one or two properties, it's probably not worth it now, really. Whereas if you've got sort of 4 to 5, possibly even more, again, you're looking at a limited company wrapper and stuff like that, but it's a lot more tax efficient. But again, it's this additional cost and stamp duty as well. Now, because you're buying it as a limited company, as not as a private person, you are going to be paying that additional stamp duty, and that is just another tax that you've got to pay. Yes, it'll be another source of income for the government, but it's what's going to happen to the housing market, to that stock of people who they can't get a mortgage because they don't have the deposit, and the banks won't take their rental payments of £900 and £800 a month as proof that they could afford a £600 to £700 a month mortgage. It's just going to leave these people out on, in worst case, not out on the streets, because there's not the social housing stock there for people to go into, because rightly or wrongly, the government sold off a lot of the social housing on the cheap, on the market and stuff like that. And again, you squeeze the landlords, they will, yes, they'll put the properties up for sale and they'll get them on the market. But then what's happening to those tenants? You've got to find another person or another company that will turn around and say, right, we'll buy that with tenant in situ, which again is quite rare to find, because they don't know the history of that tenant, they don't know the payment history, they don't, it's all that sort of worry and concern. And I don't know, it's one of these. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes in a year's time, 2 years' time. I know there is a push to try and get more houses onto the housing market, but by doing it this way, I don't think it's going to be the right measure. I think it's going to cause a lot more problems. I think at this, certainly don't quote me if I'm wrong. I think we could end up pushing the housing market. The cost of houses will probably rise because of this, and then all of a sudden we might even actually get a market crash or a dip. Probably not as far as a crash, because there will be a lot of housing stock on the market with this additional rate of stamp duty. It's going to put people off buying those bigger properties, so therefore buying the more expensive properties. So therefore they'll wait until that property drops down in value to then, I can get it just on the next band of stamp duty and stuff like that. I don't think it's a particularly good measure, but it's certainly not a great idea for long-term investment either as well because of this. So it's one of those ones where we have to wait and see what happens, I think.
I mean, for me, Dave, that's probably the big bits of the budget from my side of the table. I don't know if there's anything else that you've got on your list.
Yeah, there's a couple of sneaky ones I've spotted, because obviously I've got a copy of the budget, and this was my evening last night reading through this. Double cab pickups I thought was quite a nice one that they've managed to squirrel away in the background of this. So a few months back we had the issue where double cab pickups were, I think it was in July time, where they were classed as a car and not as a commercial vehicle. And then obviously it went to the Court of Appeal, and it ruled
returned very quickly.
Flipped around, and now from the 1st of April 2025 for corporations and 6th of April 2025 for non-incorporated businesses, they will be classed as a car for benefit in kind purposes and for corporation tax and for general tax purposes.
I've not seen that either.
So yeah, it's quite a sneaky one to sort of slip through. If anyone really does want to read the budget, it's item 5.91, treatment of double cab pickup vehicles. So yeah, it's
I think there'll be a rush to HMRC's website to find that item.
Sort of see what's happening on that. But yeah, it's going to be quite an interesting one. That's going to affect quite a lot of guys that use, a few of our clients that use double cab pickups as well in their business. Again, because not only do you need to ferry stuff to and from site, but also you need to ferry workers to and from site. You can't technically do that in a standard transit van. Double cab pickups were pretty much perfect for that. So I think that's, again, a lot of the farming community were hit by that, and I think there will be again come April time when that comes through. So yeah, I think that's obviously sort of the main points we've covered on the budget. Again, we've got the increase in national living wage or minimum wage. I feel a bit loath to call it living wage because it's technically not, is it really? It's the minimum wage when it was originally brought out. So yes, it's nice to see a 6 or 7% increase for the 21s and over. But again, you've got to find, those companies have got to find that money to cover that. And again, they've then also got to find the money to cover the additional employers NI that they have to pay on that. One interesting one, I noticed that the 18 to 20 year olds are going up £1.40 an hour, which is quite a jump, really.
Yeah.
And I know they're trying to bring in an alignment with adult and junior sort of salaries. And again, this is obviously another step towards that, where it's only sort of £2.21 an hour difference now, or come April, between the 18 and 21s and the 21s and over. But even down to the 16 to 18 year olds, where it's £7.55 an hour they're going up to. So I'm going to have to start paying my eldest a bit more. I think it's going to be quite depressing. I'm trying to get my money's worth out of him.
That'll fire him.
That'll fire him.
Might upset the dinner table.
It might be quite an interesting chat around the dinner table when that happens. So, but yeah, I'll be making sure he's certainly stocked up with work for his extra sort of 90 pence an hour for that. So. Any other sort of areas you want to cover? Or?
No, I think that's everything for me, Dave. Just thank you for having me on again, and it's always nice to get an opportunity to speak to you after the budget.
I know. Even though it can be seems a bit doom and gloom at times, but we try and look at the bright side of things as much as possible. It could have been a lot worse than it has been. It's not ideal, but we stiff up a lip and we'll just keep going on, don't we? Really. So
as long as clients leave from these sessions down a little bit more, I think we've achieved.
I think we've tried to got our goal out there, sort of thing. So. But likewise. I mean, if there are any other parts of the budget that we've not covered, or you really want to have a chat, or really sort of see how it affects you personally, by all means, give us a shout. Myself and Sam as well. We're more than happy to chat to people. Hence why we do what we do, sort of thing. Because again, we got into this to help people understand tax, to help people understand their finances and how to sort of really look after themselves and the guys that work for them as well. So. Thank you again for your time.
No, happy to. Thank you.
Thank you.